Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this conference that marks the end of the project Ukrainian CSOs for Change, promoting human rights, deinstitutionalization, and social inclusion of people who have intellectual and/or psychosocial disability. When we started our project back in early 2018, we had no idea what was ahead of us. We were living in a world where some experts were warning that unknown viruses could create havoc, but their calls for vigilance and action went mostly unheard, and the world continued its destructive path unabated. Now, 4 years later, we are learning to live with a virus that does not want to go away. We live with the understanding that other pandemics might hit us, which are even more difficult to beat, and also with the knowledge that if no urgent measures are taken, the sea levels will rise with another meter or two, inundating many islands and even low-level countries. As the UN Secretary General said a few days ago, we are on a suicidal path to self-destruction unless urgent measures are taken. To those living in social care homes in Ukraine, and those who live in social care homes in other parts of the former Soviet Union, these are not issues that will keep them awake at night. Ostracized from society, rather few have any clear understanding of what happens outside, and their lives are concentrated on the very limited space of the social care home where they live, and where in many cases they will spend the rest of their lives. When COVID restrictions were imposed, in the spring of 2020, still with a general understanding that these would not last long, many people complained about the restrictions on their liberty, on their human rights, and the psychological consequences of the lockdown were considerable and are still the basis of many national and international studies. For those living in social care homes, life became even more difficult. The lockdown restrictions that caused so much stress and distress were for them a normality, but that already oppressive normality saw new restrictive measures added, and as an attempt to prevent COVID from entering the social care institutions. The result was in many respects an isolation that was hard to bear, both for residents and for staff. Our project was part of a wider initiative to reform the system of social care homes in Ukraine. Started after Maidan, hoping that the elan of reform would also make it possible to tackle this sorry remnant of Soviet mental health and social policy, we hoped that together with local and national authorities, services could gradually be made more humane, more client-oriented, and not so much focusing on excluding people from society, but rather including them in normal daily social life. We understood that this was a Sisyphus task, with at maximum 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, and sometimes even 1 step forward and 2 steps backward. But we felt that if we would not start now, we would lose this unique opportunity. I don't think our timing was wrong, but what we miscalculated was the level of disinterest on all sides: society, public opinion, national politics, and also the donor community. A key factor that played an obstructive role was the fact that social care homes are truly invisible. Most people do not even know that they exist. And even those who have been administratively involved in running the system have little understanding of what transpires there, because to them it has just become an administrative burden. These are papers, no people, and not lives. When we made a film based on interviews with social care home residents and showed it in 2018 at the Verkhovna Rada, it had a shock effect. Even some of the bureaucrats had tears in their eyes because suddenly they saw the women whose anonymous papers had been crossing their desks. COVID gave our project a new dimension, of which today you will see some examples. Because when people were distressed about the isolation that COVID caused, and about the ways in which their daily lives were messed up, we suddenly had a unique chance to explain to them that this was the normal reality to tens of thousands of people spending their lives in social care homes. In other words, you may complain, but to you this is temporary, and for them this is permanent. And thus the Ukrainian version of the Mind the Gap campaign started, creating videos that gave voices and faces to those living in these institutions, bring home their story, their experiences, and their predicaments. The video, made by the Ukrainian filmmaker Lesya Kharchenko, are unique documents, because never before have the lives of these invisible people been made so clearly, and I would also say so beautifully, visible. Another positive side of the COVID project is the fact that thanks to our project, and thanks to additional support from the European Commission, we managed to provide practical support to many social care homes and mental health institutions. We disseminated large quantities of personal protection equipment, PPE, financed by the European Commission or donated by others, like the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This not only helped to mitigate the crisis, but also showed to the management of these institutions that we are not their enemies. We do not come to criticize and then disappear. We criticize for sure, but then want to partner with them in order to improve the situation. We come as friends, critical friends, but not as enemies. And you can tell that a million times, but nothing works better than to show it in practice. Of course, there were also negative effects. Some of our plans could not be implemented and are either on hold or need to be restructured once the COVID pandemic has stopped messing up our lives. I personally very much regret not being able to meet with the residents of the institutions where we worked. I loved meeting them, talking to them, seeing how gradually their facial expressions changed when they felt that their life was changing and when hope entered their lives and they started to believe that their future might become more bearable. Also, I regret that meeting the management became more and more difficult because of the imposed travel restrictions. They also changed over time and became much more open and supportive. However, I'm very happy that we managed to support them during these difficult times and believe that better days are ahead of us. The system of social care homes has not changed. 4 years might seem long for a project, but for the reform of such a deeply entrenched, ossified system, 4 years means nothing. It's a very short period indeed, but I hope that we manage to plant some important seeds and that the process will continue. We, on our side, will do everything possible to make that happen. I would now like to give the floor to Yulia Pijevskaya, who for 4 years fulfilled the almost impossible task of guiding our ship through rocky Ukrainian waters. Yulia.
Thank you so much, Robert. Dear colleagues, could you please show my presentation? Nice to meet my colleagues here, and nice to imagine how many people are watching to us right now. And thank you. And I would like to say something about our project, Ukrainian CSOs for Change, main achievements and impact of the project in Ukraine. This project was funded by the European Union. And as Robert said, it's a quite long-term project for 4 years, and it's still ongoing. We still have some sorts of activities we are implementing, and I will tell you about these activities as well. So. Just some words about project's objective. Specific objective of the action is to build capacity of Ukrainian civil society organization nationwide, and especially in Donetsk and Poltava regions, to actively advocate for social inclusion, deinstitutionalization, combat all forms of discrimination, promote human rights, and equality for people with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities. The action is geared towards activation of the deinstitutionalization process in Ukraine, which involves complex efforts aimed at dismantling the current institutional system, while in parallel developing community-based services for people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. The key stakeholders of the action were and are as follows: relatives and people with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, governmental officials, both on a national and provincial level, personnel working at the social care institutions, and general public, local communities, and the media, and finally organization of civil society. Final beneficiaries are people with intellectual and or psychosocial disabilities who live in social care institutions, their family members, their caregivers, as well as other vulnerable groups who are in need of human rights protection and community-based services instead of social confinement, including people with other disabilities and as their social peers. So the project, so our activities of our project were focused on a lot of types of activity, and the first one was building capacity of Ukrainian civil society organization and civil society activists nationwide. The project was started in May 2019. It was initial event was organized in Kiev at the Embassy of Lithuanian Republic in Ukraine, and it was organized as a one-day conference. It was a really great networking opportunity attended by 100 persons, and it greatly improved and deepened the relationships between civil society organizations and activists with relevant governmental bodies as national level and local levels as well. I mean, as Ministry of Social Policy and local departments of Poltava and Donetsk regions. Then we moved ahead, and you see some pictures from this event. And the project team has developed a two-day training design and program. It was developed by mental health perspective advocacy expert and deinstitutionalization expert. There were developed two models, and these materials were based on the needs of Ukrainian colleagues. Was from CSOs and from staff, from personnel who belongs to personnel of social care institutions. So we had three training events on human rights and deinstitutionalization, advocacy, and community-based services. In three locations. First one was in Kiev on October 3 and 4. Then the training team moved to Kramatorsk in Donetsk region, and the third location was in Poltava. You can see some pictures of this event. It was in Kiev, Kramatorsk, and Poltava. The first day of training intended to provide basic concepts and common understanding on mental health and human rights. Open floor for discussions and trigger new understanding of paradigm shift in mental health area. First day of the training also included a number of interactive exercises focusing on presentation of best practices in the area concerned globally and regionally, followed by discussion on possible applicability in Ukraine. And the second day of the training was devoted for developing basic practical skills based on psychosocial rehabilitation model to be used by specialists and CSOs activists in their daily activities with their clients and peers in provision of social and mental health care services. Interactive exercises and tasks for groups were designed to inspire a thinking of daily practices used by specialists and trying to deliver new person-centered approaches aiming at supporting clients and peers for more autonomous and independent living and more effective psychosocial rehabilitation. In total, all these three events were attended by 70 stakeholders, and 65 of them completed this full two-day long training program and got their certificates. And feedback from participants and answers evaluation questionnaires that were specially developed for the training demonstrated that the level of awareness of the core points of the training topics has increased. The project team, we have to add that the project team deeply appreciates the Ministry of Social Policy and local social protection departments in Poltava and Donetsk regions as well for their priceless support with organizing of this event. Another one kind of our project activity was financial support to local social society organizations. And in 2020, despite the coronavirus, a sub-granting scheme for local organization was organized. And main goal of this sub-granting activity was to strengthen the role of Ukrainian civil society in promoting human rights and fundamental freedoms, to use such tools as advocacy and awareness raising and etc. to combat all forms of discrimination and promote equality, human rights, and social inclusion for people with intellectual and/or psychosocial disabilities nationwide, and with a specific focus on Donetsk and Poltava regions. And as a result, following the evaluation of 7 applications received, which meet the evaluation criteria, 6 applications were chosen by the project team evaluation committee, and 6 grant agreements were signed with local CSOs for projects to be implemented in Ukraine. Now you will see a list of these projects. Poltava Regional Charitable Foundation Public Health, and their project was a step forward, integration and protection of the right of people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. Then we had a project, All Ukrainian CSO Coalition for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities, prevention of institutionalization of youth with intellectual disabilities in Poltava and Donetsk region through participatory advocacy of community-based social services. Then we had a project promotion staff training for the social care home staff in Donetsk region. It was a project by Ukrainian organization Phoenix and NGO Donbas Integration, their project Children of War, Invisible Wounds. NGO Psychability, they filmed a 15 minutes movie which was named Breaking the Vicious Circle. And Gerela Charity Association for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities implemented a project named Anti-Stigma Inclusive Theater Performances for Poltava community to raise awareness and capacity on inclusion of persons with intellectual disabilities. 4 out of 6 sub-grantees will present their projects today, so I'm not going being placed ahead of our 4 brilliant speakers who will join us very soon and tell us in detail about their projects. But I would like to emphasize that all these beautiful initiatives that were resulted in different perfect projects demonstrate how much people can do for other people, even operating with a quite limited budget, just having a strong wish to change the situation for better. So one more about capacity building activities. Site visits to the Netherlands and Bulgaria. The main goal of the action was to give a possibility for the key stakeholders from Ukraine visit these countries for observation of best practice examples on how UNCRPD, United Nations Convention of Right People with Disabilities, is approached there. What obstacles there are, how they are met, and what the outcomes are. And in June 2019, a 6-person delegation from Ukraine visited the Netherlands on a site visit to community mental health services. This delegation consisted of the head of the Department of Social Affairs of Kyiv municipality and the deputy head of the Department for Social Affairs, directors of 3 social care homes in Kiev, and the director of the Institute of Psychiatry. The group visited facilities in 4 municipalities, including psychiatry hospital setting, protected living environments, day centers, and an eye center and a restaurant run by people with mental health problems. Then, in October 2019, a group of 5 mental health professionals from this Svetoshinsky social care home in Kiev, it's the largest social care home in Ukraine for women, and about 700 women are living there. They visited Bulgaria to observe, to see community mental health services in practice. And during their visit, they saw several protected living environments, day centers, and other care institutions, and met with those responsible for the deinstitutionalization process at the Ministry of Social Policy of Bulgaria. During the visit, ideas were developed how to further the process of changing living conditions at the Svetoshinsky social care home, start the process of preparing clients for full or partial reintegration into society, and many other useful topics devoted to the institutionalization. And during the visit, details of future Bulgarian-Ukrainian collaboration were discussed, and the agreement was reached to search for funding for future site visits, both in Bulgaria and the Netherlands. Another very important and significant part of project's activity was awareness raising campaign, and it's a continuous activity which is implemented throughout the whole 4 years period of the project. The project team continues to pay attention of the society and professionals to the problems of closed institutions such as social care homes, and the need to reform the existing psychiatric and social care systems. A bunch of articles, interviews, and comments dedicated to these issues were published in newspapers, online, and in social media. Some you can see, it's just some of titles. Except publications, some of awareness-raising events were as follows. For example, two public lectures by Professor Sir Graham Thornycroft, an expert on community-based psychiatry from the Great Britain, were organized in September 2019 in Kiev. The lectures were dedicated to the development of balanced community-based mental health services. As the first lecture was at the Kiev City Center for Public Health for the representatives of social services, psychiatrists, psychologists, and the public. The lecture was attended by about 70 participants. And the participants of the event gained new knowledge about the organization of services for people with mental disabilities at the community level. And the second lecture was held on September 28 during the round table, which was organized in cooperation with the Institute of Legislation of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. It's our parliament. On December 13, 2018, mental health and human rights lecture and concert at the Lithuanian embassy in Kiev was organized, and the audience of more than 80 representatives from the social care and psychiatric systems, as well as officials, professionals, relatives, and clients of mental health services, human rights activists, lawyers, and other stakeholders. At the same day, there was a working meeting on the transformation of social care homes in Donetsk and Poltava regions and Kiev, and it was in Kiev at the same early morning. The main topics discussed during the meeting were principles of the United Nations Convention, guidelines and basic principles of work, reassignments of clients, staff and client training programs, for personnel and etc. Representative of the Ministry of Social Policy, departments of social protection of Donetsk and Poltava regional state administrations have attended this meeting as well. On May 13, 2018, one of the project partners, Ukrainian Psychiatric Association, was one of the organizers of the roundtable discussion on problems of national policy and legal mechanism of the protection of human rights of people with mental health problems and psychosocial disabilities under the Parliament of Ukraine. Then, on May 2019, a conference devoted to the problems of deinstitutionalization and social inclusion was organized in Kiev, and it was attended by about 50 participants. The presentations were devoted to the problems and reforms in mental health system and social care homes. In 2020, except coronavirus pandemic, Ukraine faced with a huge crisis in mental health services. As the start of the second phase of the healthcare reform in Ukraine and the pandemic at the beginning of April 2020 have propelled mental health provision in Ukraine into a humanitarian crisis. A sharp reduction of funds for inpatient treatment before completing the preparation and development of community-based mental health care services, ensuring the shift of staff to such services resulted in dismissal of personnel and premature discharge of patients, putting their life in danger. So we were focusing our work on paying attention of the society and professionals to the crisis in mental health system Ukraine faced within the country. And the project partner FGIP is also in collaboration with the World Psychiatric Association, assisting the Ukrainian Psychiatric Association in developing plans to modify the financial structure that was rolled out on April 1st and led to ongoing crisis in psychiatric services in Ukraine. And the situation appears to be so worrisome that the World Psychiatric Association decided to respond to the request by establishing an international expert committee with the goal to assist Ukrainian colleagues to develop recommendations to Ukrainian Ministry of Health. Then a mental health policy brief was developed by the WPA and sent to the Minister of Health of Ukraine. And it was also published. Also, in April 2020, one of the project partner, FGIP, started an international campaign, Mind the Gap, to advocate for social solidarity with those extra hard hit by the lockdown restrictions. The slogan of the campaign is yes to physical distancing and social solidarity, no to social distancing and social isolation. The campaign was rapidly supported by 50 organizations worldwide, including more than half a dozen Ukrainian organizations. You can see some links on useful websites. Ukrainian part of the campaign has started on June 2020, and a lot of Ukrainian celebrities, like a famous poet Serhiy Zhadan, support the idea of the campaign and its messages, and had agreed to support the campaign and become its ambassadors. The European Union allowed us to use part of the budget of the project, Ukrainian CSOs for Change, to develop clips within the framework of the campaign. The main message of the campaign is to advocate for those living in social care homes, with an explanation that for regular citizens, the lockdown restrictions might be difficult, but that for clients in social care homes, these restrictions are normal and lifelong, and that they are now even further isolated. For this moment, we had made 5 video clips, which are disseminated via our websites, social medias, and so on. The first video was also demonstrated during the conference Emotional Well-being and Social Solidarity during the COVID-19 that was held in Kaunas in 2020. And also it was demonstrated this summer during the WPA Congress, which held in Kiev on July 9th. So, and now we are in a negotiation with some Ukrainian channels with the purpose to demonstrate the video number 5 on December 10, which is International Human Rights Day. Today we will demonstrate you 2 of our 5 videos and hope you will enjoy them. As I said, the project is not finished yet, and we still have some ongoing activities. And first of these activities is conducting a research, situational analysis of the human rights of people with psychosocial disabilities and the right to mental health in the communities during the COVID-19 pandemic in Ukraine. Due to the coronavirus lockdown and strict government restriction in Ukraine, the piloting of the personal ombudsman services has been replaced by a comprehensive research study on human rights and mental health situation during the COVID pandemic, based on an international methodology. And the next one is a manual on United Nations Convention on Rights of People with Disabilities. This manual is developed and will be published in Ukrainian and Russian as an advocacy tool for local civil society organizations. This manual was developed by an international legal expert in this field, and it must be a good tool for the Convention of the Right of Person with Disabilities. It's an international human rights treaty of the United Nations intended to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. And parties to the convention are required to promote, protect, and ensure the full enjoyment of human rights by persons with disabilities, and ensure that they enjoy full equality under the law. The convention has served as a major catalyst in the global movement from viewing persons with disabilities as objects of charity, medical treatment, and social protection towards viewing them as full and equal members of society with human rights. We have to make the last video for the Mind the Gap campaign, and we have some nice ideas how to do that. And the last type of activity is developing and publishing 2 leaflets, one for the media and the second one will be dedicated to the recovery process. And both are important, of course, but the leaflet for the media is urgently needed in Ukraine. Now you can see why. This screenshot I made in August 2020, and it was the article which was published on the one of very popular resources. We should work with the media. We have to educate them, not to promote, but eradicate such disregarding attitude towards people with mental disabilities, and avoid some such unbelievable titles in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Oh, wait. Please, dear participants, please fill in a very short survey. On YouTube comments, you will see the link. So please, and now, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Julia. So Julia mentioned these videos that we made within the framework of the Ukrainian Mind the Gap campaign, of which now 5 videos are made. And we are now going to show you the first one.
Людям з психічним захворюванням тяжко знаходитись в ізоляції, тому що вона залишається наодинці.
Это действительно сложно и жутко. Мысли ведь они никуда не уходят, они продолжают бегать. Обдумываешь, что происходит, что светит, что не светит в жизни. И, в принципе, изоляция вообще паршивая штука. Вообще ощущение отторжения коллективом – это жуть. Когда ты понимаешь, что ты в обществе неприемлем, что ты просто ошибся адресом, когда родился. Просто ощущение, что ты здесь неуместно. И сидишь в этом когнитивном мешке и не знаешь, куда тыснуться.
І тут, коли ти ізолюєшся, тому що ти потрапив до лікарні, ти ще і зверху ізолюєшся тим, що ти на карантині. Ти не можеш обійняти людину, яка до тебе приходить, привідати. Ти не можеш вийти елементарно самостійно на прогулянку.
Я думаю, что было бы здорово, если бы люди понимали, что на этой стороне тоже люди находятся. Не злобные монстры, которые просто вот у них цель сесть на шею и сидеть на ней. А просто это такие же люди, и у них тоже переживания есть, у них тоже мысли есть.
люди з психічним захворюванням потребують простого розуміння, простої підтримки, простого спілкування. Ми такі ж люди, як і ви.
I would now like to give the floor to Karila Levitskaite, who is the Director of Mental Health Perspectives, the main partner in this project. Karila.
Hello, everybody who is listening in, I hope, both languages, in English or Ukrainian. After such a detailed, I would say, presentation made by Yulia, our partner in Ukraine, I would like to a little bit go through the main concepts which led to the implementation of this project, which are in the very heart of this project, and I believe in our organizations. That's mental health, psychosocial, disability, and the right to live in community, which these concepts are based on CRPD, on modern understanding of disability, psychosocial model of disability, and how to, how to bring them, how to address the issues, the new concepts. We need to refer to some processes. And the processes are very important in this project and in general as advocacy and deinstitutionalization, right? We need advocacy for change. We need advocacy for deinstitutionalization, and it's not easy. In general, advocacy is something that we put on the agenda, providing a solution to the problem and building support for acting on both the problem and the solution. In other words, we have the given situation. We have the institutional-based mental health care and social care, and we need to go somewhere into brighter place where deinstitutionalization is happening and people can enjoy life in community, and people can just be supported living among other members of society. But this task, we all understand, it's just very huge, and the deinstitutionalization is not a one task, right? It's not a one thing to be done or one methodology to implement, right? It's a huge interrelated process. And moving from institutional-based care to deinstitutionalization, it takes years, miles, and a lot of changes in very different layers and different systems. And maybe that's the question, maybe institution-based care and moving from this problem we have to refer to the solution we have to propose. We can move in little pace, right? We can move in little steps, step by step. But what those steps are, what needs to be taken? And our organization, we work in Lithuania for 20 plus years, for 21 years almost. In a couple of weeks, there will be our birthday, as organizational birthday of 21. And during these 20 years, our organization was participating both and probably also watching the change in Lithuania. And I wouldn't dare to say that in our situation in Lithuania we have it achieved where we stand. I don't know. I can explain what happened, that we got the policy of the deinstitutionalization like 7 years ago, and there are milestones and programs within that. But I couldn't exactly say in which place we are, and that's. This is also very important to understand that this moving towards the deinstitutionalization have to be in line with core values, as I said, with core CRPD values, in order to keep us on the track, because such concepts as trans-deinstitutionalization, we all know, right? When we achieve something which is not in line with CRPD, and because of lack of understanding of human rights-based approaches, is also usually there are many ways how countries choose this path, and it's normal process actually to because it's difficult to make the straightaway move. But to make this move more straight, we need to agree on basic values while advocating for deinstitutionalization. And I personally was traveling in Ukraine. I was meeting communities and NGOs and professionals, and providing trainings together with my Ukrainian colleagues. And I find that place also very good place to refer these values. And the training model we have developed, it includes the basic, I would say, approaches, basic understandings in line with CRPD. And we usually start trainings and capacity building from remembering what human rights are, why the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has emerged after World War II, right? We get into this historical culture perspective. And then we talk about birth of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. How was it born, and what does it bring, what does it mean? And especially we talk about the Article 19th of CRPD, right? The right to live in community, and what exactly does it mean? It's very important to understand that the right to live in community is not somebody who is abandoned in a house, in a neighborhood, right? It's right approach and right support should be available. So, and then we go to the models of disability. That there are different models of disability, and we used to refer on the biomedical model of disability culturally and worldwide, actually. And the social model of disability and human rights model of disability is something that emerged. And that we also refer as a very important part. And what is deinstitutionalization? We have to start what institution is. And from Goffman, to nowadays, what are the features and why are they not suitable for helping people, for supporting people, for providing people with right and proper care? And what does it exactly mean, community-based services? I remember like 10 years ago, there was one politician who was active in social issues, affairs in Lithuania. And when the question of community-based services was on the table, she was really having the position that we can't afford ourselves to let people out from the institutions because community-based services, because community won't provide service for them. That's an understanding, right? Community-based services, that your mother, your neighbor, or your brother has to take care. And that's frightening, right? Because we don't understand that. And we need to get on the same page with all these concepts. because they are not included into academical or mainstream, I don't know, education. And about independent living, yes, what's the personal assistance, right? What does it mean, and what kind of services, public, both public and special services, have to be in place, and how do they look like? And we talk a lot about best practices, about good practices, let's say, not the best, because we don't know what is the best practice, but we refer different examples from some very advanced WHO, let's say, supported practices to our findings and our, let's say, Lithuanian practices, because we need to share the idea how it could look like. Because people, they learn from the examples, right? They learn from stories. And we need these good stories very much. And we go also to psychiatric diagnosis. It's because we refer on the biomedical model so much, we need to a little bit to challenge that. We need a little bit to explore what's behind the psychiatric diagnosis, and how it can be used, and for treatment, for providing care for people, but how in let's say general society it can be misused, right, as a tool of stigmatization. And we can explore deeper into the psychiatric diagnosis and a little bit to divide needs of people, support for people, and individual needs of people from psychiatric diagnosis, because it's very much attached in our, post-Soviet, let's say, countries, that psychiatric diagnosis defines it all. It doesn't, right? All the people they experience differently, and they have different needs anyway. And peer support, this is something that is very important to develop, to support, because we know that best ideas from peer support, they really they impact very much the social services, including peer as a member of providing support. And also practices of peer support are included. And also coercive measures, what's that, and why they're important to be monitored and to be reduced and to be abolished, and what's the understanding in social services about coercion, what's understanding in mental health care services about coercion. There is a lot of about to think, and what's possible in the reality, right, and in given reality. And of course, recovery approach. Recovery, not clinical recovery, as a personal recovery, how it expands the understanding of how can we help, how can we provide support, on what can we expect, and don't push the people to be in place as we think they should, right? So all these concepts are absolutely important in the path of deinstitutionalization. And also mental health continuum model, which is referred to Gordon Allport, the psychologist who suggested that, is also it's also the good tool for people to try to understand that we all have mental health, right? We all are in this continuum somewhere, fluctuating all the lifetime. And some people get in the one angle. Sometimes some people maybe fluctuate in another, place. So we are different, and we all have mental health. That's important to also to refer. And advocacy. We can target with advocacy methods many stakeholders. And in our project, NGOs, civil society was very important stakeholder to be targeted. And when I explain all this new capacity building and concepts providing, we really were trying to reach NGOs, and I guess we did reach. I remember some very nice NGOs from our meeting, and later not meeting, but having them in the Zoom, because 2 years of the project was in the pandemic state. And NGOs can make a huge change. And Western countries, the countries which have long path of deinstitutionalization, let's say, the NGOs were these triggers which really made a huge impact towards deinstitutionalization. So NGOs could further impact government, which is responsible for changes, right? Systematic changes, but with the very important intermediate stakeholders, media and communities. We need to, it's not impossible that the NGOs directly target government and they agree on everything. There are means, and one of the really most strongest means is media and community. And media was in this project, I think, in the core activities of this project, which enhances the response and the message bringing to government and to community. And the community enhances it again in bringing to government, because if people are aware of their rights, of their possibilities, they can really relay their needs to what is broadcasted as a problem, as a solution. People can be more active, and the civil society is usually very, very big driver for changes. And again, it contributes to NGOs, to creations of NGOs. And this is my emphasis, that NGO is a very important stakeholder, which has motivation usually, which represents grassroots, right? Because NGOs have the real stories, real needs, and real people, which is flexible, which can pilot things, and this flexibility allows implement new projects, innovative projects, and pilot things using creative ways. And NGOs really have its own expertise, very different, but we have to value the expertise brought by NGOs. And in Lithuania, I think best deinstitutionalization experts and CRPD experts are in NGO sector. So people grow, and NGOs also grow. And grow by international networking also. International networking is something that NGOs is very active in. And when you get into the right paths of international networking, I think it contributes to the growth and to the expertise very, 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 very strongly. And of course, NGO is change driver, right? So, what Julia really explained in detail all the activities. I won't maybe mention all of them, but the advocacy during this project for deinstitutionalization was started from mapping NGOs. The main activity from the very, very start was mapping NGOs to reach, to involve, to raise capacity together with professionals and other stakeholders. Trainings and this capacity building in Bulgaria, I think they served as very important activities for capacity building. 6 small grants for NGOs. By NGOs, 6 beautiful small grants, very implemented in 2 provinces. And this national or international even awareness raising campaign was in place, and it took a huge part of the project, especially during pandemic, when the awareness raising was especially needed and especially in place, and also the way to approach people, maybe through media was the best one. Materials on United Nations CRPD developed and translated into Ukrainian, which is important tool, and other publications to be in place, and numerous meetings with stakeholders, researchers, which also could contribute to further advocacy, the finding of research, because research is about the rights of people with disabilities, with psychosocial disabilities, and right to health during the pandemic, which is, you know, that pandemic, it brought all our issues, underserved issues, brighter, high, you know, we got it on the table that we have problems in our systems, that we have unrepresented populations in social care homes, that we have to face that. Well, what impact? Yeah, we can go from institutional-based care to deinstitutionalization a long, long way. And the question is whether the final point exists, right? Because there's always something to enhance, to better. We can go that in small pieces, in small steps, which are not always easy to measure or to obtain as a step. But I think our project also brought this valuable general understanding of core values, of core concepts, which are based on human rights, which are based on recovery, which are based on new methods, new view to the situation, on social disability model towards the deinstitutionalization. And we can see, I think it's as a little spot in that big journey, but also we can see it as a little, like I say, heart or idea, or what can you say by values, right? You can see as a big like a wallpaper, right, for the deinstitutionalization too. So thank you very much, Robert. I give your word back. Set it all.
So Karila mentioned the CSOs and the NGOs in Ukraine that we were working with. Within the project, we also had this small grant program, and we would like to have several of them present the project that they implemented. The first is Natalia Zlatopolska from Poltava, from the Poltava Regional Charitable Organization Public Health, who will give her presentation. Natalia?
Okay, my congratulations to everyone. My name is Natalia Zlatopolska. I represent Poltava Regional Charitable Foundation Public Health and also Poltava Institute of Economics and Law of University Ukraine. And now I'd like to tell you about our project. And I'd like to allow me to make my presentation on my screen. On my screen, I see some information that I can do my presentation. I can demonstrate my screen. Okay.
Just a minute, we're working on it.
Share the screen. She needs to share the screen. Everything's allowed.
Natalia, you need to share your screen.
I try to share my screen, but you need to allow me to do it.
Is she allowed?
The administrator of our conference to help me to demonstrate this material.
Just a minute. Share your screen.
Okay, I can share my screen. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, you can go ahead.
Good. Okay. And now I'd like to tell you about our project, A Step Forward, Integration and Protection of the Rights of the Persons with Intellectual and Psychosocial Disabilities. And the main problem of our project is that the pupil during the quarantine restriction, pupils of boarding schools are especially isolated, and it's also negatively influence on the staff of institution and often leads to a discriminatory approach in working with person with intellectual and psychosocial restrictions. And the attention of the community at this time is more aimed at ensuring the interests of ordinary citizen. Therefore, the project aims to strengthen the potential of the community staff of boarding schools and their students, and spreading the philosophy of non-discriminatory integration and effective social integration in the society. And in our project, we had some goals, and I'd like to tell about them. First of all, it's strengthen the potential of the community by attracting the attention of stakeholders to the problem of dialogue in the field of integration and socialization of persons with intellectual and psychosocial restrictions. And then the next goal was strengthen the capacity of boarding school staff and rehabilitation centers for persons with intellectual and psychosocial limitation by engaging the training seminars. And also the next goal of our project was to strengthen the potential of the persons with intellectual and psychosocial limitation by involving them in the correctional and integrational program implemented by a team of specialists. And that's why we had some project activities. First of all, it was a discussion round table with the involvement of heads of boarding schools, heads of relevant state structures, representatives of public associations. Also, the next activities. Next activity was special seminars for the staff of boarding schools and rehabilitation centers. That was series of training seminars, and the next activity was a special program for a person with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. Special correctional and integrative program for them. Now you can see the first activity of our project in a round table, a non-discriminatory approach in providing services to persons with intellectual and psychophysical disabilities. And more than 40 participants joined this round table. During this meeting, we have a possibility to discuss very important problems. For example, to discuss a problem of discrimination and stigmatization of such persons. Also, we discuss a problem of protection their rights, and we discuss a social adaptation and integration such people in our society. The next activity was a special program for the staff of boarding schools and special training for them. This program includes three thematic models and 9 training meetings. More than 100 participants joined such program. They got a certificate for them, and now you can see our speakers from different fields of knowledge. And now you can see the process of our training, our speakers also, the main work in this program. And the next activity of our project was a special correctional and rehabilitational work with persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. And the main goal of this program was to promote the actualization of internal potential of everyone person and the development of adaptive abilities of such children. For this goal, we use some methods. For example, interaction games, free and thematic simulation games, special dances, rhythmic and physical experience, conversation, discussion. And now you can see a team of our specialists. You can see that this team consists of highly educated specialists, for example, speech therapists, special psychologists with experience of practical work more than 15 years with such kind of children. And now you can see the moments of realization of our correctional and integrative program. Then we organized a final round table, and more than 13 participants joined this round table. During the meeting, we discussed the results of our project, and also we decided how to continue such activities in our practice work. Now you can see that media also has information about our project. Stage of the project were covered on radio and TV, and also we had a possibility to give some development equipment to peoples of the institutes where we implemented the project. And I think that we have achieved our goals because the problem of discrimination and stigmatization has gained publicity, and the training program was meaningful and interesting, and also pupils of different board schools received interesting experience, and that's why I like to thank you for this opportunity to realize our dreams. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalia. I would now like to give the floor to Raisa Kravchenko. Raisa, are you there? Hi there. Good to see you, Raisa. The floor is yours.
Nice to see you too. Thank you, Robert. I would like to say that we appreciate highly the opportunity to join the activities towards better, so to say, situation with the rights of people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. For those who don't know me and our organization, I would like to say that I represent all Ukrainian NGO coalition for persons with intellectual disabilities, which is quite a big organization, which is the umbrella organization for 118 local grassroots NGOs and also for the services for people with intellectual disabilities, and mainly it unites the families, mothers, brothers, sisters, etc., etc. And generally, we represent about more than 10,000 people, 10,000 families altogether. And recently, in September, we made the review of the effect of COVID and also changes in the policies, in Ukrainian policies, and we identified that 60% of our NGO members have dropped the scope of their services to people with intellectual disabilities. Therefore, it is so important to act, to empower people, to do advocacy, to give some instruments to them of how to protect the rights of their children. And our mini grant was dedicated to empowerment and raising capacity of the groups of self-advocates with mind to prevent institutionalization. It is difficult to say in Ukraine about deinstitutionalization. The task, I would say the priority task, is to stop the flow of people into the institutions, because currently the only guaranteed place for a person with intellectual disabilities who finds herself without external care, without the family care, because of the death of his or her mother, or because of some other circumstances, it is institution. No other way out. And so therefore there is a big waiting list into the institutions. And although for 8 years our coalition is trying to identify and to tell the local authorities and national authorities that quite a lot of people need supported living, the service, the social service of supported living, which is, according to the law, considered a basic social service. And we do identify for 8 years, but nothing happens. We are trying to advocate for that, nothing happens. We submitted consequently two shadow reports on CRPD to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but nothing happens. The first report we submitted in 2012, the second in 2019, and the committee developed recommendations in 2015, 4 recommendations dedicated to our target group, to people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, but the authorities ignored these recommendations of the UN. And that is why it is so important, and we are so grateful to you to allow us to speak immediately to people and to tell them how to protect their individual rights. And currently it is not enough that the grassroots NGO would write letters about the need to provide the community-based services, mainly daycare, day services. it is needed that each particular person submits an individual application for the services. And we trained both persons with young persons with intellectual disabilities and their legal representatives to do so. We told about the basic legislation, the laws and sub-laws, about services, about how to apply to for services, when to apply for services, how to protect their individual right. And we hope that at least in Mariupol, the NGO is quite successful, and the leader is very strong, and they managed to organize services based on their NGO. And the persons with young persons with intellectual disabilities themselves were trained to write these applications, which have to be submitted every year. In Poltava, the situation is a little bit more complicated because the initiative group of mothers and their young adults with intellectual disabilities, they were trained, they submitted applications still, and still it is difficult. Their applications were rejected, and we hope they repeatedly will do so. But such the similar activities, the similar trainings should be provided to young people with intellectual disabilities, and also to their mothers, predominantly, mainly mothers, because there are quite a few fathers, mainly mothers. So such trainings are needed to all Ukraine. We have representatives in all the regions. We have member organizations in all the regions. And yesterday we had a telephone call from Ternopil, and they asked, could you please tell us what to start with? We need their services in the community, and please tell us what to do. And it is a good luck that within this micro project, we managed to develop also instructions. The instruction for the legal representatives of what to do, what to start with, when to write application about social services, and they have to be, these applications have to be written individually on annual basis every January, because January is the time in Ukraine, according to the special instruction of the Ministry of Social Policy. And so January is the time to identify the need in social services. And since your need is identified, then you're awarded a position of potential client, potential user of social services. And all this is written in the special instruction, which was developed within this micro project. And also we developed the guide for persons with intellectual disabilities, and we used, of course, easy to read format with pictures, with all the meeting all the standards, European standards of easy to read, which was done in electronic version, not in the paper version, but it can be found in our website on self-advocacy, and the whole website is in easy to read. And so this kind of guide on how to advocate your individual right to community-based social services, it will be, I hope it will be useful for the other localities, not only Poltava region and not only the Donetsk region. So we are grateful, Robert, and we wish you good luck and we wish you all the success. And we hope that such projects as yours will at least stop or delay those regressive changes which we regret to observe currently in the rights of persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities in Ukraine, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raisa, and let's hope that soon we can meet again live in person. Have a good day. I would now like to give the floor to the next speaker, Alexander Moroz of the organization Phoenix. Alexander.
Hi everyone. So my name is Alexander and I'll be doing today's presentation on our project. In just a moment, let me get it up. Okay. All right. So title of our project is Personnel Training at the Neuropsychiatric Boarding School in the Donetsk region, and it's presented by the Kiev Regional Public Organization Phoenix. The main beneficiary of our project is the Kamychevsky Neuropsychiatric Boarding School in the village of Kamychevska, Donetsk region. And as you can see on this map, it's very close to the front line where military actions are taking place. So within the framework of the project, 3 2-hour trainings were held in Skype, the topic of which were agreed upon by the participants. Their requests were addressed by the training leader, clinical psychologist, and former head of the Department of the Methodological Support for the Rehabilitation of People with Mental Health Problems of the Ministry of Social Policy, Irina Anatolievna Lubinitskaya. The training themes were burnout and stress prevention on the 22nd of March, complex emotional states, skills for coping with anger on the 29th of March, and psychological boundaries, constructive methods of conflict resolution on the 5th of April. In addition, at the request of the Department of Social Protection of the Population in the Donetsk region, which is responsible for the work done in neuropsychiatric boarding schools, in March of 2021, an unscheduled training was held for department employees on the prevention of professional burnout in cooperation with the Deputy Director of the department, head of the Department of Social Protection of the Population, Natalia Pirogova Borisovna. So within the framework of the project, 2 brochures were developed and published in an edition of 1,000 copies. Prevention of professional burnout, that's the one on the right here, and stress prevention on the left. Both brochures are aimed at a wide range of readers, so as to be useful to both doctors as well as nurses and social workers. And brochures contain many practical exercises which a person can do on their own. And these brochures can be downloaded on the Phoenix website. And here is the link to the website, or they can be downloaded from the web pages of organizers and project participants on their Facebook pages. That's a picture of Kamychevsky Psychoneurological Boarding School, the entrance to it. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, technically, it's impossible to have a question and answer session. So we are very grateful for your presentation. I would now like to give the floor to Olga Maruda of the Jirela Charity Association for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities. Olga, are you there?
Yes, one moment, please.
Okay. We're a bit too early?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm sorry, I have presentation, and I try demonstrate it.
Yeah, you need to share screen. Yeah, very good.
Oh, thank you. We have, my name is Olga Maruda. I'm from Jirela Charity Association for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities, and our project is an anti-stigma and inclusive theater performance for Poltava community to raise awareness and capacity on inclusion of people with intellectual disability. The future of young persons with intellectual disabilities age 16-20 in Poltava region are usually connected to big institution. Community-based services are not available in both Poltava town and the rural areas. The families of persons with intellectual disabilities know about international experience of community inclusion, but they do not know if supported living is possible in their area. The NGO artists are also not aware of how to advocate for the community inclusion of young adults with intellectual disability. The professionals from Poltava social services and welfare decisions makers do not realize provisions of supported living services as their obligation according to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, saying nothing about common people from Poltava region who consider big institution as the natural agency for persons with intellectual disabilities to get care. So it was necessary to change the visions of the stakeholder group in Poltava. Persons with intellectual disabilities, their parents, services providers, NGO activists were informed that persons with intellectual disabilities have the right to live in the community, not in big institution. Our organization has got 27 years experience of advocacy community-based services in Kyiv. With the help of inclusive theater performances, they demonstrated anti-stigma attitudes. Actors with intellectual disabilities talk about their own feeling as individuals and personalities, and taught others to respect their dignity. The inclusive theater performances started for public events. It's one event, it's round roundtable anti-stigma discussion and 3 training sessions, and then person with intellectual disabilities parental NGO activists, professionals, and enjoyed training seminars discussed while preparation of this project proposal. They selected training focus among the following advocacy of community-based social service, plain language, easy read info for persons with intellectual disabilities, empowerment of parents NGO for the long-term advocacy of supported living instead of institutional placement. The actors with intellectual disabilities demonstrated innovative approach to adults inclusion and the Jarella professionals share their 27 years of successful experience of community-based services for people with intellectual disability in Kiev. Our project was successful, we hope, we know, and effective. The objectives were achieved. All activities were implemented as we planned. It was demonstrate the successful model of inclusive practice for young adults with intellectual disabilities from Jarella Charity Association, inclusive theater to the stakeholders from Poltava. Jarella professionals shared successful experience of community-based services for persons with intellectual disabilities to parental NGOs, professionals and decision makers from Poltava, and gave basic knowledge necessary for the community-based services initiative for young adults with intellectual disabilities to parental NGO activists and professionals in Poltava. The following activities were prepared and implemented. It was 4 public events with anti-stigma performances of inclusive theater and the training advocacy part of promote and capacity on community-based service for persons with intellectual disabilities in Poltava region. Public events in Poltava region. It was anti-stigma performances from inclusive theater. You can see photo from this performances, and the training seminar on community-based services standards for the future. Volunteers to support community inclusion of persons with ID. Next, it's performance and roundtable discussions of prevention of institutionalization and introduction of their community-based services for persons with ID in Poltava region, with involvement of Poltava authorities, governmental representative on the rights of persons with disabilities, advocacy, local NGOs, local universities. And next, it was performed training seminar on plain language for participation of persons with intellectual disabilities in the advocacy for NGO Soneshnik from Poltava. And next, it was performance and training seminar on community service advocacy for the parental NGO рівні можливості. During July, communication with regional organization continued namely its consultation were held regarding the classes with members of organization, people with disabilities, it's the constitution and law of Ukraine of elections, the law of Ukraine on help of psychiatrists consultation, and it was consultation were held regarding the correction and operation of a socially interactive theater as a tool for working with stigma in society regarding people with intellectual disabilities. The project participants had the opportunity to analyze and discuss the achieved results of the project, the influence of theatrical methods on the formation of a positive image of a person with disability, stimulations social activity in discussing the needs of people with disabilities, planning and creating innovation services in society. And the participant planned a series of trainings and performances for the future activities of the theater. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Olga, for joining us. We would now like to show you the fifth clip of the Mind the Gap campaign, which was recently produced by Lesia Harchenko.
Хороший. Парунчик хороший в нас. Мухи його з'їдають, звісно, нічого. Виросте і буде теж коров парувати, буде обще стадо ходити, пастися. Раніше вчився в обичній школі. Тоді мати заболіла туберкульозом, узнали, коли я пішов в школу. Не було кому мене, не було кому мене і лічити, і туди-сюди. Не було матір кому лічити. І не було, бабуся сліпенька була, не було кому мене теж і вчити. Відправив мене в будинок-інтернат. Тоді бабуся померла. Разом мати 9 років мені була померла. Бабуся в 14. Я вийшов з інтернату, одучився в училищі Гадяцького. А тоді, як переїхав, хату розібрали. Сусіди допомогли мені оформити мене в інтернат, так мені не було де жити. Так опинився тут. Як мене відправляли сюди, мені та сказала, а як це так? Ти вийшов з дитячого інтернату з обичного, тобі положено було жилье. Чого тобі не дали жилье? Ну нічого, на державу не треба обіжатися, президенти міняються.
Ну, наші батьки вмерли, коли мені було 9 років, моя мама вмерла. Ну, у нас в сім'ї 4, всіх по інтернату порозкидали. Менших брата і сестру їх усиновили, а я залишився один тільки в інтернаті. Просто переїжджав з інтернату в інтернат. Ну, несправедливість, ну, від цього ти нікуди не подінешся, треба жити далі. Не опускати руки, а йти до своєї мети.
Більшість наших мешканців потрапили до нас з дитячих будинків інтернатів або з сімей. Тобто десь вони в сім'ї не доотримували певної уваги, можливо розвитку, можливо там занять в школі. І відповідно від цього ж десь відставали в школі, в класі, вони на них не звертали на відповідну увагу. Я вважаю, що наше завдання – це перш за все виявити той потенціал в кожному мешканці нашого інтернату, який в нього є. Навчити його жити в суспільстві.
Стенд з фотографіями, з моїми. Це ми тут були і в Києві, і з робочими футболу є, зіграли з нашими. І снігових баб усього ліпили, і на рибалку їздили. Друзів в мене багато, ворогів немає.
Ну, тут ми живемо, ось якраз ми всі втрьох тут є. Наші апартаменти. Ну, мене в 13-му году просто побили, моя проблема з головою. Епілепсія почалась, нікому не нужний, жилья немає. Болячка така, що з роботою дуже нікому ти теж, тому що на роботі епілепсія хватала.
Я робив на заводі слесарем 10 років по ремонту оборудовання.
Не так страшно, як люди думають ззовні, що психоневрологічний будинок-інтернат, що це люди там з такими розумовими розладами, не можна сюди заходити, не можна з ними спілкуватися. Більшість з них це нормальні люди, адекватні, вони зовсім не мають якогось там другого вигляду, ніж ті люди, які знаходяться ззовні. Нормальні, добрі, добродушні, вони займаються теж і там господарством, і люблять і телебачення, і футбол, і шахи, і шахматами. Саме головне, я вважаю, це більше давати їм увагу.
Ну, мрія взагалі про свою сім'ю. Хочу сім'ю завести, щоб в мене був свій будинок, машина.
Знайти жінку, завести дітей, знайти роботу хорошу. Хай не калими, а нормальну роботу. Я ж вчився на електрозазварника, хочу робити електрозазварником по своїй професії.
У мене нема свого жилья. Аби в мене було своє жилье, я би вже давно пішов відсюди.
Хотів би попросити, щоб почаще з акордеоном, баяном приходили концерти.
I would now like to give the floor to Rob Keukens, who is a mental health consultant of FGIP, a mental health advisor of the GGZ Academy in the Netherlands, and chairman of the board of GIP Benelux. Rob, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having the opportunity to say a few words to you today. When I was preparing this presentation, I came across a poem by the Ukrainian poet Ivan Franko. And looking back at this project, his words could have been the motto of the project. I would like to say a few words about how the social circumstances influence people's health and people's mental health, and say a few words about the role and position of social workers and the important role of civil society activists. So, ladies and gentlemen, mental health has no generally accepted and scientifically valid model of how the human mind works. It has no model to guide its practice, teaching, and research. And while all human experience is mediated by our biology, the claim that mental disorders are a form of a brain disease is an ideological claim, not a scientific one. The current paradigm tends to view people as objects influenced by internal causal forces, rather than subjects who have reasons to behave as they do. While this view has led to advances in science and general medicine, it falls short of understanding our emotional suffering, our psychosocial problems, and our sometimes distressing behavior as a meaningful, functional, and understandable response to life's circumstances. It is this philosophical basis that demands a fundamental rethink about what mental health is and how we should address psychological distress if we are not to end up with variations on the same unsatisfactory system. A different type of public mental health care for people with mental health conditions and/or intellectual disabilities puts the personal meaning at the center and recognizes the role of the relational, social, economic, and political context. Because the individual does not exist and cannot be understood without these. An increasing part of the psychological and psychosocial problems of people are caused by what is happening in society. Technological developments follow each other in rapid succession. Social values and positions are constantly changing, and what is familiar is disappearing. For many people, the exponential acceleration of the complexity and the growing social inequality that characterizes our lives is a source of great concern. They cannot keep up with the pace and are at risk to become marginalized or even further marginalized. The social process that is underway leads to a general expansion of insecurity and fear because our existence is no longer predictable. People, such as people with intellectual disability, who have already found themselves on the fringes of society, can no longer keep up. Many of them also face an accumulation of problems: poverty, debts, poor housing, loneliness, unemployment, and discrimination. The long-lasting subjective experience of being an outsider disrupts people and leads to the feeling of social defeat. Human victims of social defeat typically experience symptoms like low self-esteem due to the low regard by the group, feelings of depression and anxiety due to a threatening environment, and a plethora of physiological effects. This all results in social withdrawal, a reduced investment in the social environment, lost connections, and a loss of status. All this requires a social rather than a psychotherapeutical or medical solution. Our current treatments, including talking therapy and medications, and the scientific basis for them, have their limitations. The knowledge invoked by evidence-based medicine is based on standardized situations and on what can be measured, preferably in randomized experiments. This knowledge does not sufficiently take into account differences between clients or persons and their personal values and the dynamic settings in which they live. Mere scientific evidence as a good basis for good public mental health care is an illusion. Good care also requires other sources of knowledge that is underutilized, such as local knowledge derived from clients themselves or provided by civil society organizations. Knowledge of the context, clients' living conditions and preferences, and of the values at stake. Decision-making in healthcare can be seen as an experiment in connecting all these different sources of knowledge. It is a process of combining theoretical and practical knowledge and how to implement this in the real world. And uncertainty is inherent in this and should not be denied, but rather embraced. The realization that people cannot be understood without considering their context, and that mental and psychosocial problems are related to the social environment in which people live, is gaining momentum. The Lithuanian psychiatrist and the UN National Special Rapporteur on the rights of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, noted in his report that the limitations of focusing on individual pathology alone has been acknowledged, locating disability and well-being in the broader terrain of personal, social, political, and economic lives. He also added that mental health is to a large extent a social science, and this understanding should be used to guide its practice, and that therefore the crisis in mental health should be managed not as a crisis of individual conditions, but as a crisis of social obstacles, which hinders individual rights. In other words, disability resides in the society and not in the person. Also, the newly elected president of the American Psychiatric Association, not a very progressive association, even she, Vivian Pender, noted that we needed to be more aware of the broader context in which mental illness occurs, and how that context shapes the health outcome. The Lancet Commission on Global Mental Health and Sustainable Development recently stated that research consistently shows a strong association between social disadvantage and poor mental health. At the individual level, the Commission reported that concrete social factors such as poverty, childhood adversity, and violence are key risk factors for mental health problems. And a recently published article in Social Science and Medicine, political scientist Matthew Flynn even argues that global capitalism is maybe the greatest systemic social determinant of health worldwide, and that the growing income inequality undermines the health of many people across the globe. In short, people in the lowest socioeconomic groups have worse health than those in the middle groups, who in turn have worse health than those in the highest. This social gradient means that mental health conditions are more common further down the social ladder. And it is on the bottom rungs of the social ladder that people with intellectual disability and/or mental health conditions can be found. In other words, according to WHO, a preoccupation with individual symptoms may lead to a situation which separates what goes on in people's heads from social structures and context. I am sure you are all familiar with the well-documented connection between the socio-economic context and the level of well-being. But let me give you two random examples that illustrate this. First, a growing body of evidence supports a link between exposure to adverse childhood experiences, also called ACEs, and poor physical and mental health outcomes. And the impact of ACEs is cumulative. The greater number of ACEs one experiences, the more likely one is to have a mental health problem. For instance, you can see it on this slide that if you have 4 or more ACEs, the risk of using intravenous drugs is 11 times as high as the general population. People with 6 or more ACEs can die 20 years earlier than those who have none. The number of suicide among people with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences is 14 times as high as among people without. %9 of the children in the United Kingdom have experienced 4 or more forms of adversity in childhood or adolescence. And in the previous video, we saw some moving examples of how these ACEs influence the lives of people in the social care homes in Ukraine. So the number of ACEs increases the risks enormously, and it leads to often interrelated health problems. Another example: growing up in an impoverished urban neighborhood more than doubles your chances over the average person of developing a psychosis spectrum disorder by the time you reach middle adulthood. So action to reduce the prevalence of mental health problems and to counteract the marginalization of people with intellectual disabilities must occur in sectors beyond mental health. The need for cross-sectoral contextual approach calls for a broad network community-based approach across the borders of the various domains. An integral approach and cooperation far beyond the borders of mere medical care is necessary. Many people with mental health conditions and/or intellectual disabilities struggle with persistent problems in multiple areas of their lives. The social recovery of these clients requires intensive cooperation at the local level between mental health care, welfare, general practitioners, municipal health services, social services, education, and civil society organizations. Measures to strengthen a community-based approach include activities to increase social connectedness, improve community environments, foster participation in community decision-making, and increase awareness of both risk factors and community resources to support mental health and well-being. An important role is here reserved for the social worker. In my view, the natural ally of civil society organizations. In a community-based integral approach, we do not need more psychiatrists or psychiatric nurses as much as we need more social workers. The social worker's task is to advocate for social justice, equality, and the overall well-being of people in need, and are thus the natural partner of people in a vulnerable position and of the civil society organizations. This advocacy performed by social workers includes civil rights for all citizens, provide disadvantaged groups to access to health care, to run child abuse and neglect prevention programs, or employment programs for disadvantaged groups, and a humane treatment for those with mental health conditions and/or developmental issues. On a more structural level, measures are needed that consist of actions to change the social and economic influences that can lead to mental health conditions and the disadvantaging of people with intellectual disabilities. Such measures might include seeking to reduce income inequality, poverty, unemployment, domestic violence, discrimination, and homelessness, for example. It is here that CSOs, civil society organizations, can make an invaluable contribution as an instrument of social movement and initiate grassroots activities to pressure governments to take action. Social movements have been described as the organizational structures and strategies that may empower oppressed populations to mount effective challenges and resist the more powerful and advantaged elites. They represent a method of social change from the bottom by advocating changing norms, value systems, and laws. For instance, by demanding full civil rights and equality under the law to all citizens, regardless their capacities or mental status. Civil society organizations are watchdogs and lobbying institutions that bring forward specific concerns of the citizens, give the citizens an effective voice, and therefore enhances the quality of decision making, create alternative institutions for serving public needs, mobilizing communities, awareness raising, and facilitate effective interlinkages between the variety of interests in society by serving as a link between underprivileged individuals and the government. The Ukrainian Civil Society Organizations for Change project is a good necessary step to improve the positions of CSOs. Let's hope that they continue to work together, exchange good practices in advocacy, and find synergies. Jointly expressing concerns increases the reach and visibility of their message and will increase the impact of their indispensable work. It is often a long, tough, and complicated process to change an existing situation. But remember, there's nothing permanent except change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. In conclusion, I would like to thank all the speakers for their participation in this conference. I would like to thank the audience, both here and online, for being with us. So as I said at the beginning, we will continue our work in the field of social care homes. We promised ourselves not to give up and keep on pushing for change in partnership with institution management, managers, and with authorities, both on local and national level. We will continue to promote deinstitution and the development of alternatives who will slowly but surely replace the social care home system, and advocate for a change in public perspectives, because the public opinion is a very important tool in bringing about change in this system. We can only support. I think this is very important. We are not the ones to make the change. We can only support change. We can empower people, organizations. We can provide examples that can be taken up. But eventually it is the Ukrainian authorities themselves who have the responsibility of bringing about the change that is so very much needed. And they will always find us as a partner and supporter. We would like to ask you to please complete the survey, which can be found on the YouTube channel and later also on our social media. We will keep you posted. And remember, when you are on our YouTube channel, there are more of our Mind the Gap videos. There are also other videos which you can share as widely as you want. And so my advice is subscribe to the channel and you will get information of new ones that will be posted. So thank you very much for this and hope to see you again. Thank you.